So I will start with the obvious question, and since we have David on the call, Ben, how did you decide, at what point did you decide to add vocals and even make, based on the press release, make the music a little bit heavier, darker, although taking a bigger kind of home, you had that stuff in your music before?
Yeah, so I think the moment when it happened was that I was writing this new record and having come off of a bigger kind of home, I was just looking to do something different because I had made 4 records up to that point of like kind of mostly instrumental. I had sung on a few tracks here and there. Um, but in like the drive of just trying to like do new things with the medium and with art and with music, I was talking to Brian Horn, who's the guitar player on the record as well, and who I've been friends with and been in bands with for 20 years. And so he and I had just been chatting about ways to make it different. And he said that he had met this guy, Dave, who was learning metal singing, who seemed like a cool cat and might be interested. So I think I remember Dave having the first call with you, and I think I was like sitting outside of my kids' like gymnastics class,
Yeah,
and we
I
were
think I remember that.
and we were like
In
talking
your
about like
car.
how to sing heavy metal vocals. So really, I think the decision came out of the desire to try something new with the project and to push it into a new direction. I kind of felt like I had just sort of maybe not exhausted, but like gotten a little bored with just doing instrumental instrumental post rock for a while. So yeah, I mean that's how I remember us getting involved, is that you were working with Brian and I was working with Brian, and then he was just sort of like, hey, you guys should meet.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Before
Yeah.
moving to the Reclaim Chaos related questions, how do you pick titles for instrumental music, man?
So on the first
Brilliant,
on the
brilliant
on the
question, I gotta say.
yeah on the first 2 Sleep Mouse records, it was because I was referencing old 1950s and 60s pulp sci-fi magazines, and I was using a lot of samples from that time period, and so I would go into this directory of images of like all those pulp serialized sci-fi mags and find song titles out of the images of those, and I would sometimes change a word or two just to make it fit better, but like Men Against the Stars, and that was the first single off the first record, and a bunch of the other ones are just basically directly from these old time magazines, because I was going for that aesthetic. And then on Bigger Kind of Home, the titles were all because I thought of a theme for the record, which is like this idea of alienation in your own country. And so I used the album title came from one of the vocal clips I used, and then yeah, the song titles from there just kind of developed naturally. I don't know. It's just part of the it's just part of the deal. You got to come up with song titles somehow, man. I don't know.
So for Reclaim Chaos, David, you wrote the lyrics. That's correct. Is that correct?
Most of them, yeah. I mean, Ben and I kind of passed some stuff back and forth, and I think even at one point for one of them, I can't remember. I think Ben, you ended up like just kind of like humming and kind of gibberishing like one of the some tracks, and I literally was like, "Oh, I really like that part," and literally just like took it and like honestly actually used a few of your like gibberish lines and like tweaked them a little bit, made them make sense. But yeah, I mean, for most of it, I guess I would say that yeah, I was writing the lyrics and everything for that.
Did you discuss the themes or whatever you need to cover? Because Reclaim Chaos, to my mind, it connects something with the pandemic. I don't want to connect the albums with the pandemic, but the mindset, right? Reclaiming the chaos that we had.
Yeah, for sure. I think Ben can also speak to this for sure, but at least for me, yeah, I mean, learning metal vocals and harsh vocals was very much a pandemic hobby, something I'd wanted to do for a long time, and it finally was like the opportunity to like do it. And so, even whatever 2 years into the pandemic, um, when Ben reached out and we started playing around with stuff, for me the theme and Ben was very much on board with this theme, very much that isolation, that feeling of like um, how fragile and sort of delicate society is, and how uh, even in this like the U.S., this big imperialist, very wealthy country, we are just like one pandemic or one chaotic political regime away from just like chaos, from everything sort of breaking down, and sort of the common folks just being sort of stranded and on their own. And so I don't think at least for me, I didn't the writing didn't come out of that, speaking directly to those things, but it was just sort of the mindset I was in. I think a lot of people were in,
Yep.
that led to all those ideas and sort of the shift. And it just kind of, for me, I ended up sort of like imagining it as sort of this like whatever cosmic horror album. So I just kind of filtered everything through this sort of metaphor, this sort of like weird cinematic space that Ben loves to write so awesomely. So that's kind of our trajectory, I think, from there.
Yeah, we didn't set out. I would say that we didn't set out with a specific, like, with this album is about this, and every song is gonna, it wasn't like a
True.
a concept album. However,
Mhm.
I'm a big believer that, as you work on something, wherever you are in your life, whatever's going on is always going to impact that. And so, we wrote this towards the end of the pandemic. I'd say people were out of their houses at that point, but we'd all been stuck
Mhm.
inside. But I think, yeah, like at the time when I was writing the tunes, I was looking up a lot of like quotes and reading a bunch of stuff about control and like the lack of it, and that something like a pandemic shows us just exactly how much control we have in our lives, which is almost none at all, because things can happen and you lose it all completely in
Mhm.
a week. And so, the idea being that I think after we kind of started doing the work and honing in on the ideas, that the idea of reclaiming chaos was to be like, well, if life is chaotic and the world is chaotic, there's a way to use that and harness that as power instead of having to control everything. And this, I think also a lot of this came from when Dave and I started talking, and like about your background, and like about kind of like some of the religious stuff in the background, and like
Mhm.
feeling the chaos of that. That made its way into the record, I think. Um, and then some of it was just like, very, I'd say just very organic. Like themes emerged from Dave's lyrics that I thought were really cool, and I'd be like, oh, why don't we pursue that some more and like focus more on that and kind of like aim that direction. So it came together really naturally. I don't think we set out to do a specific thing, but it feels like we did, which is great.
My question had more
Yeah.
to do with, you have the music, we have the lyrics. At some point, those two need to agree, if you know what I'm saying. You cannot have a heavy music and discuss about flowers. Although that's a nice idea. You could do that. There are no limits. So for Ben's vocals, did you, Ben, for David's vocals, did you, Ben, give him all the vocal lines, or you let him do whatever he feel like?
Yeah. So we wrote this record 3 times. We actually did. This is what you're listening. What you're listening to is the third version, essentially, of the record, second or third.
That time is a charm, right?
Yeah, because I wrote. I kind of was writing it already when Dave got involved.
Okay.
So I had the sense of what was going to be, and I was actually going a totally different route. It was much more softer, less heavy. And then when Dave got involved, and I was like, oh, maybe we should make this heavier. We started going for like a heavy approach. But then at a certain point, I remember I was here and I have like all these pedals and stuff, and I was just feeling like I want to mess around, and I like kind of hit onto a sound that ended up being the beginning of the title track, the first song, just using some weird pedals, and I put some like some electronic beats on it and really tried to amp up the atmosphere. And we were all kind of like, ooh, this sounds like something special, and this sounds like something different, and maybe we should go ahead and just take all those songs we wrote and just like completely redo them. So I did. So I think it was in that process that, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but in that process, I would send Dave some tracks that had me, like just fucking like, making noise on top of, to be like, here's an idea of a melody. But a lot of times I was kind of like, Dave, you send me what you hear, in terms of a melody. And, and if I have comments, we'll talk about it and we'll figure out how it works. But I kind of just gave Dave the reins to make a melody, because I kind of felt like the project's always just been, it's kind of a solo thing. And the more I involve other people and the more I let them have some of the creative control and to like add their own personality and their own sort of experience into it, the better and better it gets. Not to say that like I don't think, I don't suck, but like I do think that having other people's influences on there is always a great thing. So yeah, so Dave, I would just send you tracks for the most part, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, when Brian, we got it chatting, and I think you sent me um which one, you sent me one track that you had already had like a pretty far along, and yeah, it was just kind of like, hey, see what you can do with this. And I just remember very embarrassingly just like listening over and over and over again, and like literally on my mic, like humming along and like making weird noises and doing the gibberish thing for like just hours and hours and just like and a little keyboard and like trying to just like, oh, what did this part did this, and just like really, really organic, and just kind of spontaneous. Um, and so, yeah, so that's kind of that's how we started. And I'd like to think that my process got a little bit better since then at the next few tracks. But yeah, it was a lot of Ben's guidance and Brian, all you guys having input and just being like, oh, we really like this. Oh, what if instead of this part going, up here or going into a harsh vocal here, what if we kept that clean for longer? And, yeah, it was very much an organic and just back and forth process, or you would come up, hey, totally redid this one part of this song, like, so this might not work anymore. What can you do with it? And so it very much was this kind of passing back and forth, which made it feel less intimidating, I guess, for me, is kind of my first whatever adventure into this kind of thing. But also just made it feel a little bit more cohesive, and we were working off each other and being inspired by each other, which made it a lot of fun. Yeah, and I do remember that kind of that moment. I think all three of us were listening to that you redone this track, to have a little bit more like the electronic influence and some of these like heavier sounds and weirder pedals and stuff. And just everybody's response was like, oh, that's cool. Like that feels like everything we were liking what we were doing before, but then it was just like, this is like that extra special spin, that twist that is just really working. And we forced Ben to go back through and change everything all over again. But it was really fun.
To clarify, you said, David, this was your first attempt in metal or in general recording vocals for
Yeah, I mean, just in general, recording vocals and stuff like that. I mean, I had done, I have a musical family, and I was choir and did all that stuff like growing up. But yeah, this is literally, I was just like learning how to do vocals, both like clean and harsh, and was like posting covers online and stuff like that. And that's actually, Brian and I had worked together professionally before in a totally different arena. But we were like friends on Facebook. And so I posted some things. He was just like, this is cool, man. Like, would you want to do something? And that's how we got hooked up. But it's literally the closet behind me is where I started. I was like in there with like, some padding and my Mac and like the cheapest stage mic ever. And I was just like playing with stuff and trying things out and developing the technique and just doing all that stuff. So yeah, this was really my first like thrust into like music writing and really like vocal recording, all that kind of stuff for me.
I remember watching that cover of Deftones. I think that was the one that really sold me, because you were doing you were doing like the harsh and the cleans in the Deftones song, and I was like, okay, I want somebody who can do both harsh and clean. And you just seemed so dedicated to like learning how to do it. Like you were like going to that school, like metal school or whatever. And like I was just like, this guy's like really going for this and like learning it. I think that's what sold me too.
So you did an unofficial audition. That's what you're saying, Ben.
I did that what?
An unofficial audition of David.
I did.
So you said that this was what we hear in the final edition. It's the third attempt. So how long did the making of Reclaim Chaos take? It sounds like a long process.
Albums for me are not short. Like some people, I really admire the people who can sit down and just like bang out a record, and do it easily. If I go back to like I bet I could look through our files and find out when we first started sending demos. But in my mind, it must have been 21, right? 2021, I think we started.
Yeah, it must have been 21.
Yeah, because then we worked on the tunes.
Summer, end of 21.
And then we met up so we worked on the tunes remotely, and then we met in LA at a friend's studio in LA, and Dave came up from San Diego, and we hung out for a weekend and recorded all the vocals and the drums and a bunch of other stuff for real in the studio. And that must have been November of 2022.
Yeah.
Almost a year ago. That's fucking crazy. It was almost a year ago. So then when I record the vocals, just to talk about the process a little bit, it's usually like I will demo and I will sit here and I will figure out what is interesting to me, and then I would send it out to Brian and Dave. They might have some cool ads, so it comes back to me and I maybe make some revisions. then we get like a pretty cohesive demo together to go to the studio, get the real vocal. I'd bring that back one more time into my studio here, and then I kind of do a final pass of like adding cool one-off sounds and trying to figure out ways to enhance the vocals. And if there's anything that's been really nagging me as I listen to the demos over and over, I go fix that. And then, and then into mix and master and manufacture. And so, and the manufacturing nowadays takes about 5 to 6 months. So as soon as you finish
So
it,
if you are lucky, if you are lucky.
yeah, I mean, the place I use, that's the average turnaround. I've been pressing records with the label, and it's pretty reliable now. Like, it got better. And during pandemic, it was terrible, and now it's better. So, and then Dave and I went through the art process because Dave did the cover art too. And I think he did an amazing job. So that was like a little bit of the time there. So, like basically a 2-year process really from start to finish. And I've had other records that have taken me longer than that. So in a sense, this one went about as smooth as it could. I mean, there's this period at the end. It's so funny when you finish a record nowadays and you're like, there we go, that's done. Put it in the queue for manufacture. Wait 6 months. And you're like, you're hype. Like, I started working on something else. Like, go to the next project, or we go do whatever we're doing. And then it comes back and you're like, oh right, now it's time to hype this, time to make a video, time to, get back into this mindset.
But it's difficult, right? Because once you are working on the music, on the project, and then you wait, it's kind of difficult to go back and say, okay, I'm back in the reclaim chaos mode.
Yeah, I mean, easier than you might think. I just didn't listen to it at all. So for like the 6 months it was in production, I like just, if they sent me like a proof, I had to listen to like the proofs on the vinyl or whatever. I sat and listened to those to be like, okay, but I wouldn't just sit here and listen to it over and over. That's partially because it had been a year and a half of listening to it over and over.
So before, I have a couple of questions about the cover artwork. So Brian wrote leads, guitar leads for this?
He wrote, so the song Second Generation, or Shattered Generation, he wrote that song and wrote most of the riffs and the leads on that one. And I came in and arranged it and did the drums and did some other guitar and the bass. And then he jumped in on 2 other songs, maybe, I think, just to do some extra leads. But he kind of on the previous record on Bigger Kind of Home, he was more involved in playing on that one. This one, he contributed some stuff and was like a really awesome sounding board for me and Dave as we kind of worked through it. The intent was to have him come up to LA to the recording session and do some recording, but he ended up getting sick and didn't make it, and then we just couldn't make it back up. So, but he's just been a really solid friend, really solid collaborator with me. I played drums on his last record for his band, and I mixed and produced a previous record for him, and we played in a band together in college, and it was like it's a very long-term relationship. So I like having him around just to be a good voice of reason.
So David, Ben mentioned the cover artwork. So did you connect the lyrics with the cover? What came first, to simplify my question?
Yeah, I mean, I think
lyrics.
I think lyrics came first for sure. And I think it became kind of like, again, this isn't necessarily like exactly what we went for, but in my brain, it was always like this like cosmic horror post-apocalyptic movie in my brain. And so, yeah, so when we wrote Reclaim Chaos and some of those lyrics started, the actual track, when we actually started writing through those lyrics, and there's this kind of talk of like esoteric, creepy stuff and old gods that are entombed and things like that. So that's very much where the visuals for me came out of. I'm a visual person. I'm an artist in, day job career. And so it became very much just like this thing in my head that was like this thing that was sort of this like entombed, crusty, old, ancient god that has sort of been the cause of all this chaos and sort of devastation, in this sort of like world. And therefore, like it sort of commands this obedience to it. And so for me, it was like sort of the protagonist's adventure through in sort of defiance of this thing. And so that just kind of came out on the canvas in terms of like the visual for the album cover of this like tiny little, humanoid character, and then this like immense, massive sort of god being that is this presence in this space that seems sort of overwhelming and impassable. But ultimately, the arc kind of traverses sort of our response to that thing. And so that's kind of always what made sense for me, and how I visualized it, I suppose.
We don't need any ancient god to bring distraction. Humanity is perfectly capable of doing that. We have proved that. We are so good in that.
The ancient evil god is absolutely our making. So
yes, everything is inside. Oh my goodness. That would make a killer backdrop. And why I'm saying this, because my next question is, are you planning to play live? And if you do, what will be the lineup?
So when the project started in LA, I had a band and we played, and then I moved to New York and had a band and we played, and I've since moved back to Northern California, and I live, pretty far out in the country at this point. And so I don't have any plans on playing live. Like Dave and I've talked about it a little, but at this point it's a recording project for us.
Come.
I know, man. Listen, if it was 10 years ago, I would be totally into it. But when you have a kid,
I understand all the everything you said, but it's just the same because there is so much depth, so many layers, so many emotion. So I'm thinking if you take that into a concert volume, that will be, it will unlock everything.
Yeah, and I even agree with you. I daydream about it all the time. I have these like daydreams about playing shows, and maybe not never. Brian's always asking. He's the one who's always kind of like, let's go play a show. So it's me really. I'm like the hermit who doesn't want to come out of my cave. I don't know. Yeah, the shows we did play back in New York and in LA, it was always fun. We had full video with it, and the lineup included Brian, and so maybe never say never, but at this point, I run this record label now. I run Lost Future, and so I'm going around a lot with other bands and going to recording sessions and dealing with their albums and kind of trying to make that more my focus, just for future career stuff. So at the moment, it's in the back of my mind, and if one day it ever happens, I'll get you there. Don't worry, I'll make sure you're there.
Absolutely. David, have you done your debut in on a stage?
No.
Okay, so I was
There's a lot of
trying
like metal and hardcore shows, but
I was trying to put some stress to you, right? It's my first studio album. So, but would you like that idea to get sleep maps?
I think it'd be a blast. Just for me, always being like a metal fan and everything, and finally like getting a chance to like work on an album and make the music that I've enjoyed for so long, has just been like a super awesome experience, a great honor. I'm excited to have a physical album that when I'm old I can point to my grandkids and be like, oh, it was cool once. And so that's just been like a huge pleasure. But yeah, I think I would love to do a show maybe someday, but absolutely had a blast working on this. And Ben's just led me delicately by the hand all the way through, and it's been awesome.
I did.
Two things
I
based on
you like a
answer.
baby.
Sorry, two things based on your answer, David. I'm still waiting for my copy.
It's coming. It's coming. I put it in the mail. I even put some extras in there for you. So
good. I'm joking, of course.
You should be getting it maybe today. Even you might be getting it today.
Oof,
so,
great.
Yeah, I sent it on Monday.
Look at that service.
And secondly, most important part of my question. He said that he will have the album to show to his grandkids. So is this the first and the final time you guys work together? Will there be another Sleep Maps album?
No, I think we work together again, right, dude? Wouldn't you work together again?
Totally, absolutely. Sign me up.
Yeah, totally. I would totally work together again.
There you go. Because I didn't like the concept of having one album to show his grandkids.
Well, I was arguing with the idea that he's ever cool. He said like I can prove I was cool, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm not sure you were ever actually cool. Sleep Maps is like pretty stonery. I don't know. Your grandkids might be like, hey, Grandpa, what were you doing?
Hey, I'm down. I'm down with the stonery-ness. Yeah, let's do it.
No, in the future, Sleep Maps albums come up when the time feels right, and right now I'm working on 2 other projects, writing, and I'm working with all these other bands. So, when the moment comes up and we feel like doing it again, I think we will. I think we will.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it might be different. Might be something weirder and different, but still, hopefully, interesting stuff to work on.
Honestly, I am at an age that I do not care about the styles as long as the music talks to me. So it's perfectly okay.
Yeah, and I really subscribe to like an older kind of belief in music that I really like. I mean, you called this out in your review, which is one of the things I really liked, where I conceptualize things as an album and not as like a song to be played on a playlist. And even the point where like if you put that song on a playlist, people are kind of like, I don't really get this. Like, what's the deal with
Right.
this song? And so there's something about the journey and like, the reason that the record label always puts out vinyl is because I love just sitting down and putting on a record and that's the thing you do instead of like having it on in the background while you cook or run or fucking whatever. So but that kind of work and that kind of dedication, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time. And so I feel like when it comes and it hits and we're all ready to kind of get back into it and feel that emotion again. And sometimes it's all about just, do I have anything to say? It's like, did we say what we wanted to say? And is there anything left to say? I don't really like retreading a ton. So, yeah, I just really believe that Sleep Maps is a project that I like keeping it really indie. I like keeping it really small. I like putting out these records that some people know about. I mean, at this point, we've got enough people who know us and like us that, they buy the record and I know they listen to the record. So I'm glad to have connected with a group of people who sort of feel the same way.
Don't put that sleep maps. That was
Just edit it.
Okay, yes, no, I will let it be. Last question for you, Ben. You said that, and you are involved in Lost Future Records. You are dealing with other bands. So, how do you feel? How do you see the state of the scene right now? From the band's perspective, putting their music out, from recording albums, the whole 9 yards.
I mean, the state of there's two things there when you ask me that question. I think of immediately. One is that people will want to come together and make music until there are no people left. I just feel like it is a very human instinct to want to do, and you've got some people who are ready to do that for the love of it because it's a calling, because it's a passion. You've got some people who do that because it's a job, and you've got some people who do that because they, want to be really, really famous. And so I think that there's room for all three of those. You've got your pop stars, you've got your session musicians and your working class mixers and your mastering guys and your studio owners. And then you've got the bands who just do it because they love it. And I'm after that third type. And, the whole sort of concept of the label was to support independent art and not worry about sales. And so the idea being that I find cool artists just, either through recommendations or I listen to a lot of music on different playlists and on Bandcamp, and to find people who seem serious about what they're doing, have probably made a record before, so they know kind of what they're doing in the studio and in terms of writing music, and then just to support that. And I really believe that like the music industry itself is not a way to make money anymore. If you want to be on tour and you want to travel and you want to like play shows, I think that's possible. If you want to just get enough scratch together to get your gas and your food and maybe save enough to do another record, okay. It's kind of like the old days of like the traveling bard is how I see it at this point, like the troubadour or the bard who would go town to town, ply his living, which is to make music that people enjoy and then go to the next town. I don't really see a future. I don't see a ton of future in touring at this point because of how thin margins are and what you see in venues taking merch cuts. I mean, that was the only way the bands that I was in and toured never made money. And when I was a tour manager, that's the only way the band made money. And so I think people are like, have realized that, and they're kind of like, we're not making money. We need to get on that merch money. So I feel like you've seen a lot of tours get canceled this year from big names too, who are just kind of like, it's not worth it. It's just no longer worth it.
Yeah.
If you're Taylor Swift or if you're Rammstein or if you're one of these bands that has like a massive show that can guarantee 30,000 people in a stadium, okay, it's your job at that point and you're doing all right because you're making tons of money. You're hiring 1,500 people to put your show on, whatever it is. And the world has got space for that too. People like to go see spectacle.
We were talking about this with David before he joined off the record though. David, let's say that Ben is sitting on Sleep Maps for a long time. Is there anything that you would like to share with us, like something like you are working on or something that you have in mind on the works? I don't know.
No. under the gun here. Yeah, not really. I still doing stuff, still like learning. I do some covers and stuff, especially in hopefully the next few months. But just it's all been for my own enjoyment, for like just I enjoy the process of doing it and learning, and I've kicked around the idea of like potentially learning a little bit more music, a little more technical aspects of like potentially like learning sort of mixing and music writing for myself and just playing around with it and seeing what I come up with. But can't point to anything real official yet or serious that I'm doing with it at this point.
Well, my question was
I'll
not
have to know.
to put pressure on you. Hey, what is your next step? No, I was trying
Come
to
on, Dave, get some stuff out there.
I was trying to see if you have something that you would like to say. I'm sorry if it came that, but my question came
Oh yeah.
like that. No.
No. I mean, it's been a blast. I do appreciate Ben's mentality in terms of like with how he uses sleep maps as a vehicle for like when he's ready to say something, when there's something that feels new and feels that the need to explore, and is not afraid to change directions and shift the sound and all that stuff, add new things. I really appreciate that mentality. So I will absolutely be around if Ben will have me for any future sleep map stuff. And I'm
We'll
happy,
see.
if it's a year from now, a couple years from now, whenever. I I appreciate Ben's kind of approach, and so I trust him that like when he comes back around, is like, hey, I've got some new ideas, I've got some new things I want to put to music. I'm here for it, and I'm super excited for that.
That's a great way to end this wonderful discussion. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I love the album, especially because I had no idea who Sleep Maps were. And that's a win for me, right? I discovered a new band, and a new vinyl record for my collection.
It's like the greatest feeling in the world when you come up a new band and you're like, oh my God, I love this. What is this? It's like my favorite feeling there is right there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend. And I don't know, hope we will discuss once more in the not so much distant future. Right, Ben?
You got it. No worries. Good to meet you, man.
Absolutely. Have a
Sounds
great
good.
day. Bye-bye.
Thanks so
Bye.
much, Demetrius. Bye.
Later, Dave.